Welcome in, belly up, have a seat, and grab a drink as we talk some Wingman fantasy football. Yeah! Welcome into another edition of Wingman Fantasy Football, the League Podcast. I am your host, Michael Furley, and as always, I'd like to thank all of you, or any of you who may be watching or listening to today's show. This is episode 76, a Week 14 preview re-record. And before we get any further along, let's make sure that everybody is in the room. Wingmen assemble! All right, now that everyone is here, we have a huge episode again for you today as we will set the slate for this week's primetime games, check in on the player news and practice reports, go over this week's matchups, check the activity of our waiver wire, and see who is on top of the newest power rankings. And we'll dive into the mailbag and take a look at our playoff scenarios.
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs.
But first, I want to once again apologize for getting this one out a little late. I'm almost all caught up as we're getting this one out on a Friday early evening. And this, so I'm sorry I didn't get it ready for your commutes today, but you can go ahead and watch this for your nighttime enjoyment and get yourselves ready for all the news and notes that you need to be ready for Week 14. And if you want to get find these podcast episodes as soon as possible, just go ahead and subscribe and or follow and set up your notifications and your appropriate podcast apps or YouTube to get so you know exactly when these things are posted. And to our members, of course, you know that you get the direct message with a link to the show in the video and audio feeds into your Yahoo League message board. So thank you for that. All right, guys, let's check in on the news and notes. All right, in Week 14 here, we have two NFL teams that are on bye this week, which means there are no Cardinals and no Commanders. So, which means that our managers will be without some potential starting players. For example, there'll be no Kyler Murray this week, no James Conner, no Marquise Doo-Doo Brown, nor Sam Howell or Terry McLaurin. You know, after reading this list, I just realized that most of these players are not very good. So let's set the schedule for this week's primetime games. And it's going to be a little weird this week because we have two games on Monday night. We have the Green Bay Packers are heading near the Big Apple to take on the Penguin, Tommy DeVito, and the New York Giants at 8:15 p.m. And at the same time, on the same day, we have the Tennessee Titans are migrating down south to Miami Gardens to take on the Miami Dolphins. Then on Sunday, there's a huge NFC East divisional matchup as the Philadelphia Eagles will push their way down to Big D to take on the Cowboys at 8:20 p.m. Just take a minute to marinate on that last sentence. I'll give it to you again. Philadelphia Eagles will push their way down to Big D. Okay, and on this past Thursday night, we had the Patriots who took on the Steelers, and we had a surprisingly mediocre scoring game as Halle Berry created a storm with three TD passes for the Patriots. We also had two players in our managers' lineups, thank God only two, as Tampa Brady had Najee Harris in his lineup, and Team B, who is still active, thank you for that, picked up free agent Ezekiel Elliott on Thursday and put him right into his lineup for a true reward. All right, as for some other player news and practice reports, Houston wide receiver Frank the Tank Dell
Once it hits your lips, it's so good.
was officially placed on the IR with a broken leg, and his season is now over. Same with Jacksonville wide receiver Christian Kirk was officially placed on IR with a core muscle injury that will require season-ending surgery. Both Puka Nacua and Derrick Henry are now off of the injury report and should be good to go this weekend, although they were both banged up last weekend. Indianapolis Colts running back Jonathan Taylor has not practiced this week, and now he has been listed as out. New Orleans wide receiver Chris Olave has been away from the team due to the flu, and as long as he can get better illness-wise by the weekend, he should be good to go. Green Bay Packers wide receiver Christian Watson has yet to practice this week and will take his questionable tag all the way up to game time on Monday night. Cleveland quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson has cleared the concussion protocol, but the Browns have declined to name a starter, meaning that Joe Flacco may get his second start of the season this Sunday for the Cleveland Browns. The Dolphins continue to rest their stars during the week, with both Tyreek Hill and Raheem Mostert missing some practice time this week, but they should be good to go on their battle against the Titans on Monday night. LA Chargers wide receiver Josh Palmer has been practicing in a limited capacity, but he is going to need another week before he makes his return from the IR, as he is now listed as out for this weekend's game. Green Bay running back Aaron Jones, it looks like he may be getting back on the field for Monday night game against the Giants, but he is still listed as questionable. Minnesota wide receiver Justin Jefferson is now off the injury report and is going to play this week. New Orleans tight end Taysom Hill has not practiced at all this week, leaving his availability for this week in doubt. Seattle running back Zach Charbonnet was limited on practice on Friday and will be questionable for Sunday's game, and that is the same for running back Kenneth Walker. So they are both listed as questionable. They both may play, but just keep an eye on that, as Team B has both those running backs, so he's protected either way unless they split carries. Jacksonville running back Travis Etienne has been limited all week and will take the questionable tag into the weekend. New York Jets quarterback Zach Wilson will return to the starting lineup for the Jets, as the Jets have voted off Susan Boyle from this season's You've Got No Talent. Philadelphia tight end Dallas Goedert is off of the injury list and looks like he will make his return this week. Green Bay wide receiver Jaden Reed has been limited in practice, but should be good to go for Monday night's contest in New York, as he's been dealing with the same injury for a couple weeks and has been able to get back on the field. New York Jets running back Breece Hall did return to practice on Friday and is looking like he should be able to play on Sunday. Cleveland wide receiver Amari Cooper is still in the concussion protocol, but he did get in a limited practice session this week, and it gives him a real chance to get back on the field for this weekend's game. Houston wide receiver Noah Brown is listed as questionable, but he does expect to play. Kansas City running back Isaiah Pacheco has already been ruled out this week with a shoulder injury. I think it has something to do with maybe a hand injury, as he likes to punch people in the helmet with his bare hand. On the other side of that coin, we have Kansas City running back Jerick McKinnon has returned to practice, and he is going to be on the field. And as we all know, December and January is Jerick McKinnon time. Jacksonville quarterback Trevor Lawrence is listed as questionable for Sunday's game with a high ankle sprain. New Orleans quarterback Derek Carr has cleared the concussion protocol and is set to make the Week 14 start. And Minnesota has named Josh Dobbs, the Jostronaut, to be their starter for the Week 14's game. All right, let's find out who's playing who in this week's matchup.
This week's matchup.
All right, in this week's matchup, this is a do-or-die time for many of our managers in regards to making the playoffs, and it starts with our first game, a divisional matchup between Amazing Spidey at 9-4 and atop of the standings up against Reggie's Lions at 6-7. After starting off 0-5, Lions went on a 6-game winning streak, but now he has come back down to earth with 2 consecutive losses, and he needs a win to have a chance to make the playoffs. As for some players that have good matchups and or bad matchups for our managers, we have Christian McCaffrey has the best matchup for Amazing Spidey this week, as he is up against the Seattle Seahawks, and that is the 5th best matchup for running backs. His worst matchup this week is Nico Collins for the Houston Texans, who is playing against the New York Jets, and they are the worst matchup for wide receivers. I'm going back and forth between him and Puka Nacua, but Nacua is playing Baltimore, who's the second worst matchup, so it might come down to weather. As for Reggie's Lions, his best matchup this week is Joe Mixon, who's playing the Indianapolis Colts, who is ranked 4th, who is the 4th easiest matchup for running backs, while his worst matchup is Amon-Ra St. Brown against the Bears, and they are the 16th worst. So he has all good matchups this week. His worst matchup is someone who is right in the middle of the tier of good to bad matchups. On to our next game. We have 8-5 Red Sox Nation who up against 7-6 Alex's Day Took Our Jobs, who needs a win to secure a playoff spot himself. As for Red Sox Nation, his best matchup this week is Tyreek Hill up against Tennessee, as that is the 7th best matchup for wide receivers. While his worst matchup comes to Release the Kyron, who's up against Baltimore, and that is the 9th most difficult defense for running backs. As for Alex's Day Took Our Jobs players, his best matchup this week is Alvin Kamara up against Carolina, and that is the 2nd easiest matchup. Last week, Kamara had one of the toughest ones, and he had a great game. So what will he do against Carolina? We will wait and see. His player with the worst matchup this week is Cooper Kupp, who finally finds his way back into the lineup, only to face the 2nd most difficult defense in the Baltimore Ravens. On to our next game. We have Paul's Cubert Rage at 8-5, who wants a win to secure the division of the odd division. He is 8-5 up against Bernie's Team B, who is at 2-11.
I'm Cuban B. Yes, Cuban B.
All right, good matchups for Paul's Cubert Rage, as he has David Montgomery up against the Chicago Bears in a revenge game is the 11th best matchup, and his worst matchup is the engineer, Rachaad White, who's always on the train, and he has a tough matchup playing against Atlanta, and that is the 2nd most difficult matchup for running backs. As for Bernie's Waddle Away, who keeps fighting, and I respect it, his best matchup this week comes to Jalen Waddle up against the Tennessee Titans, and that is the 7th best matchup for receivers, while his worst matchup is the Decepticon, A.J. Brown, who's playing in the Dallas Cowboys, and that is the 8th most difficult matchup for wide receivers. On to our next game, which is the biggest game of the week, in my opinion, among many big games, as we have 7-6 Katie's King George versus 7-6 Nick's Waddle Away. This game is huge because the winner of this game will be in the playoffs, and the loser is all but eliminated. We'll go over that a little bit more in our playoff scenarios. But as for Katie's King George, her best matchup for a player this week is Drake London up against Tampa Bay, and they're the 6th easiest matchup, while her worst matchup is Garrett Wilson for the Jets playing against the Houston Texans, and that is the 11th most difficult matchup. As for Nick's Waddle Away, his best matchup is Cortland Sutton up against the Chargers, and that is the 3rd best matchup for wide receivers, while his worst matchup is Tony Pollard up against the strongest defense against running backs at Philadelphia Eagles. Last week, Christian McCaffrey was able to have a very good game against the Eagles. We'll see if Pollard can replicate that. On to our last game on the slate. We have 6-7 Corey's Mac Daddy 2s up against the 5-8 Ken's Tampa Brady. And unfortunately, Ken's Tampa Brady was just eliminated from the playoffs, or this game would be even bigger. But nonetheless, Corey's Mac Daddy 2s needs a win to have a chance for a playoff berth. Mac Daddy 2's best matchup this week is CeeDee Lamb up against the Philadelphia Eagles, and that is the best matchup for wide receivers. We saw what Deebo Samuel did last week against that same defense. And in the very same game, the worst matchup for his team this week is DeAndre Swift, who's playing up against the Dallas Cowboys, and that is the 4th most difficult matchup for running backs. As for Ken's Tampa Brady, his best matchup this week goes to Justin Herbert, finding his way back into the starting lineup, and he is playing against the Denver Broncos, and that appears to be the 11th easiest matchup for quarterbacks, while his worst player with the worst matchup is Christian Olave, who's playing the Carolina Panthers, who are the 7th most difficult matchup. But we saw what Mike Evans did to that same matchup last week, having over 25 points. All right, guys, let's check in on our waiver wire. We had 7 claimed. We had 7 waiver claims this week, with 2 NFL players receiving multiple bids. Cubert's rage is clearly on tilt after last week's loss, as he spent $35 this week on 4 players, and 2 of those players were players that he reacquired in less than 6 days' time. But let's start off with our most highest priced waiver acquisition, as Brandon Cooks went to Lionize for $22, beating out a bid of $8 from King George. Noah Brown went to Cubert's Rage for $11, beating out bids from King George of $8 and Amazing Spidey, who put a $0 bid in. And Tyler Bass went back to Cubert's Rage for $11. This is a reacquisition this week, and we now have a new highest priced kicker from the waiver acquisitions. $11 beat out, I don't know if it was $5 or $6 that Jake Elliott went to from They took our jobs this year. And of course, we had our $5 bid from last year's Cade York, who went to Bernie's Team B. So these kickers are getting more and more expensive every year. Also, Kubert's Rage picked up a defense for $7, and there were no other bids for that defense. Alexander Madison went back to Kubert's Rage in a reacquisition for $6, while Red Sox Nation picked up Houston defense for $3. And Tajay Spears went back to Amazing Spidey for a $0 bid. All right, guys, let's check in on our power rankings.
I have the power!
By the power of Grayskull.
I'm living in it, no one man should have all that power.
Wingman Power Rankings.
All right, so let's take a look at our updated power rankings, as we all know that these are worthless. Nonetheless, we have Amazing Spidey remains on top of the power rankings, and Kubert's Rage has moved to second place. They Took Our Jobs has a slight fall to third, while Mac Daddy 2s is in fourth. King George has fallen to fifth. Lion Eyes holds strongs at 6. Red Sox Nation moved up from 9 to 7. Team B holds at 8. Tampa Brady falls down to 9, and Waddle Away is still at the bottom. Like I said, these things are near worthless, as Waddle Away has been at number 10 for the last 4 or 5, maybe even 6 weeks. And he has the longest current winning streak at 4 games. So maybe the 9 spot will be good luck for Tampa Brady this week to get a monster score. All right, guys, let's take a dive into this week's mailbag.
You've got mail.
You've got mail. Wingman Fantasy Football.
Mailbag! All right, our first entry into the mailbag comes from Anonymous, and it says here, Dear Mike, what is your stance on the waiver activity of managers that may become eliminated from the playoffs? That is a very fair question, and a lot of people have different ethics on this, but as from the commissioner's perspective, I'm going to tell you how I think about this. So, in my opinion, the NFL season is pretty short as it is, and the fantasy schedule is even shorter. You've got 14 weeks unless you're in the playoffs. So I say play it all the way out, regardless of your playoff status. Why make it easier for the teams that are fighting for spots in week 13 or 14 than it was in week 1 or 2? So play it out. If you've got money and there's a player you want, go ahead and get them all the way through the regular season. Now, next part of this phase would be how you handle the playoffs. Well, as you know, most of the playoffs, there's loser brackets and consolation brackets. And even in those, you may not be playing for much, but you are playing to have the best outcome for your season. I'm a competitive guy. If I have a chance to be 7th instead of 10th, I'm going to go for it. So I would say play your teams out. As long as your team is playing in a game against somebody, you have the entire right to manage your team as you see fit and to improve it the best way you can. Excuse me, the best way you can. If you want to get into the gray area here, I would say maybe if you're not playing for the championship bracket anymore, to maybe let the waivers go through the first time, and then after Wednesday morning comes around, you go ahead and pick up whatever you want on the secondary waiver market, the free agent waiver market. But even that, it's your right to play however you want. If Yahoo lets you make claims, you can make claims. But so my stance is regular season all the way through, no matter what your status is. Playoffs, maybe leave a little time for the players who are playing for more important things. But even then, that's your decision. And then once you're out and there's no more games, I would say, go ahead and freeze it. But no one's stopping you from making moves. I'm just more of an etiquette thing, I would say. On to our next entry into the mailbag. This one comes in from Mike, and it says, Dear Wingman, I have noticed some roster infractions lately. Can you please address this abuse? All right, well, I wouldn't call it abuse. So over the last 10 days or so, give or take, we have had some illegal lineups, roster configurations, if you will. And I'm going to chalk these up mostly to, oversights, nothing malice. And in one instance, I would say a player was a little frustrated and couldn't wait. But this is how I'm going to let you know. So whenever these things occur, I'm watching them. I might not see them right away, but I'm looking for this stuff for the most part. And I usually, if it's not, if it's in the middle of the week and not right around Sunday or Monday or Saturday, I'll give you a day to a day and a half to maybe fix it by yourself, maybe notice the problem. After that, I'll send you out an email through the league's emailer to let you know that there's a mistake. And then again, that'll give you a half a day to a day to fix it. If it's something that's more in a short-term need to correct, I will text you and or call you. If it's something that's a mistake that's made on Sunday and really blocking another player from making a move. So in this last week, we had a player pick up someone before they were really allowed to, but they could have done it by rearranging some IR moves. So they could have done it. And in this case, it was a waiver pickup, but no one else made a waiver claim. So I'm kind of taking it with context. So if that player would have been picked up and would have outbid another player who also wanted that particular player, and the player who acquired them did it with an illegal roster, I would have to address it and move players around. But as long as I can kind of see what the intention was and see that no one got harmed by it, I usually let it go for a day and a half. And in this instance, this last one, it was corrected within a day and a half because it kind of came in that quasi period while we're transitioning from one week to the next. So it was a Sunday night to a Tuesday morning situation. But again, no one else made those moves. There's no competition for them. So I knew it was going to be fixed, and there was no harm, no foul. But please don't purposely abuse that time window, and don't make me have to make the awkward call to ask you to drop a player that you've already picked up. I don't want to go into your lineups and manage your team for you. I just don't want to do that. All right, so now let's check in on our playoff scenarios.
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs.
All right, we're going to start with our first team. Where is my mouse? There it is. Oh, that was awful. All right, let's start with our first team there. We have Mike's Amazing Spidey has clinched the playoffs. He has clinched the division win in the even division to get a payout there, and he is now looking for a second payout to lock up the overall point leader. And at the moment, he is ahead right now by 62.97 points from our second highest scoring team. So best case scenario, Amazing Spidey can get the #1 seed, and in order for him to do that, all he has to do is win. He controls his own destiny. However, he can also do it even with a loss if Paul loses. So the magic number is 1 for Amazing Spidey to get the #1 seed, and that comes with a win or a Paul loss. If Paul wins and Amazing Spidey loses, as long as he's not outscored by Paul by 62.97 points, he will still hold on to the #1 seed. But no matter what happens, Amazing Spidey will be the #2 or #1 seed, will win a division, and will get a first-round playoff bye. Congratulations to me. All right, our next team on this list here is Paul's Cubit Rage, and he is the current division leader in the odd division due to his great division record, as he is tied with Red Sox Nation. And so far, he has clinched a playoff spot, clinched a bye. He can win the payout for most points, and he can win the payout for division winner, but he hasn't secured any payouts yet. So his best case scenario is to take on the #1 seed. Again, this is for Paul's Cubit Rage. And to do that, he would need to win and have Mike lose and outscore Mike by 62.97 points. To secure the #2 seed, all he has to do is win or have a Jimerson loss, as his magic number for the odd division is a 1 game between him and Jimerson's Red Sox. However, he can still fall all the way down to the 3rd seed, which is still a first round bye. And for that to occur, he would have to lose and Jimerson would have to win. So that's all the scenarios for Paul's Cubit Rage. On to our next team. We have Jimerson's Red Sox Nation, who this week has clinched a playoff spot with his win last week. Congratulations to you, sir, as he is on his trek to try and get his 3rd consecutive Wingman Fantasy Football Championship. At the moment, he is currently 3rd. Like I said, he has already clinched a playoff spot and a playoff bye. His best case scenario is to get the #2 seed. And the way to do that would be for him to win and to Paul to lose. He needs 2 things to happen: to take care of business and for Paul to lose. To get the 3rd seed, which is his worst case scenario and still a playoff bye, if he has a loss or if Paul wins, he will stay in the 3rd spot and be in that for the playoffs. On to Katie's King George, who at the moment is in 6th place. She fell from 4th to 6th after her last week's loss. And there's a little things that are different here, but essentially she wins and she's in, she loses and she is out. We'll do a little more clarification here. To get the #4 seed, if she wins and Alex loses, she is #4. Or she can get #4 if she wins and Alex wins, but she outscores Alex by a whopping 76.65 points. When it comes to catching players or holding off players due to points, I cut it off at 80 because I could see a relatively normal week of someone having 150 points and someone having 70 points. So that's not, we've hit both those marks multiple times this year. As for Katie, she could get the 5th seed. If she has a win and Alex also wins, she will fall to 5th. As for Katie being eliminated because she is so far down in points, if she loses and Alex wins, she is out. All right. Or if, let's see, she can still make it a backdoor way. She can still make it if she loses, but it will take a lot. If she loses, she will need Alex to lose and Corey to lose. And even that, she would have to outscore Alex by 76.65 points. And to lose and outscore someone by that many points would be super rare, but we'll see what happens, right? Anything's possible. On to Alex, who has climbed up to 4th place. I think this is his highest seeding since week 2 or 3. So he's been climbing up steadily the last 2 weeks. And for him, he makes the playoffs in the 4th seed with a win. And if Nick happens to win, that Nick does not outscore Alex by 4.09 points. Or if Katie wins, that Katie doesn't outscore him by 76.65 points. As the simplest way just to clinch a playoff spot and to get in that 5th seed, all he has to do is win. If Alex wins, he is in. All right, for Alex to be eliminated, it would take, he can lose and still find his way into the playoffs. However, if he loses and Nick is the loser of the Katie Waddle Away game and Nick outscores him by 4.09, then he will be eliminated. So essentially, if he loses, he needs Nick to lose and Nick to not outscore him. All right. As for Nick's team, who's made it up into 5th place, he's made it into the playoff spot with his 4-game winning streak. And of course, he's the worst team based on the power rankings. But he can get the 4th seed with a win and an Alex loss. Or if he wins and Alex wins, he would have to outscore Alex by 4.09 points. As for Nick, to get into the playoffs, if he wins, he is in. But he can be eliminated if he loses and Corey wins, he is out. Corey can catch him. So with a loss and a Corey win, he is out. He can still make it with a loss, but he would need Alex to lose, and he would need to outscore Alex by 4.09 points. All right, as for Corey's team, who is up to 7th place, trying to get to 500 for the first time all season, but he's got it right in front of him. He has the most points of these teams fighting for these last 2 playoff spots, and he can get a playoff berth with a win and an Alex loss. And then, of course, not be outscored by Alex by 78 points. So the points are nearly impossible to catch. So if he wins and Alex loses, he's in. That's all it takes for Corey's Mac Daddy 2s. Although, for him to be eliminated, it doesn't take much. If Corey loses, he is out. Reggie has similar stance as Corey, but his points are not nearly as nice. As for him to get into the playoffs, Reggie would need to win and have Corey lose and have Alex lose and outscore Alex by 20.81 points. And if Nick is the loser, would have to outscore Nick by 16.73 points. So that's a lot going on there. He needs a lot of help. He needs to win. He needs 3 teams to lose, and he needs to outscore 2 of those 2 losing teams. As for Reggie to be eliminated, if he loses, he is done. All right, here. He is done, like I said. All right, let's get back. Let's revisit an old tip and trick. One moment, please. Tips and tricks.
Or quirks for jerks.
All right, guys, this is updating our last tip and trick I gave you guys. And I just want to be a little more clear with some of the information here. All right, so I was saying if you picked up a kicker and put them on your IR, you can get a unicorn bench spot. Now, let me just be clear here. So any player in your IR spot will count towards your positional minimums. So it wouldn't be a 4th kicker. It would be your 2nd kicker, and you have only 1 defense. So if you could find a kicker on the IR and put him in the IR, and then you have, of course, your starting kicker and your starting defense, you satisfy your positional requirements for your kicker and defense, and then you can use the new open spot to pick up any offensive player, or any player for that matter, actually. But to get the most benefit out of it, it would be to pick up an offensive player. Now, we did a little deep diving here. Thank you to Red Sox Nation who took me on my experiment here. I said previously that players that qualify for the IR include NA players, which is not available. I was mistaken. I think that might have been the case in the past, although my memory could be fuzzy. But NA players cannot go on to the IR. So like a team like Red Sox Nation, who's been playing the Dallas defense and the Dallas kicker, Brandon Aubrey, all season, he is a prime candidate to pick up a kicker and put him in his IR spot. He already tried it with the NA. Thank you for that. We fixed his lineup because he went off my misinformation there. But I'm also going to give one more little tip here to Red Sox Nation since we have this little back and forth. I did notice, without too much looking, that there are 2 kickers on IR. One is set to return this week, although not official, and another one doesn't say he's going to return at all. So you still can do the strategy as long as you find a kicker on the IR. That's all I'm going to say. I can't give you any information than that. But just to know, you can still try it if you'd like. And I'm going forward, I don't think I'm going to be able to fix your lineup now that we know that NA is not going to work. So if you go for it on the IR, it should work. Of course, you can let me know if it doesn't, but I don't see why it wouldn't. They're IR players. Okay. With that being said, guys, I would like to thank all of you who are watching and or listening to this episode of Wingman Fantasy Football, the League Podcast. This was a Week 14 re-record, and you can easily find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just search Wingman the League, and go ahead and follow and subscribe while you're there so you get updated right away. Well, the alerts usually come in a little later, but our content will be there right away when you find out. Unfortunately, TuneIn Radio and Google Podcasts have been very sketchy in updating their databases. I do not know why. They were good for 2 and 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden they just stopped updating on a timely manner. So unfortunately, TuneIn Radio and Google Podcasts are a little sketchy right now in terms of getting prompt RSS updates. And of course, you can find our video feeds on wingmenentertainment.net/WFF or /podcasts rather. Also, check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@Wingman Fantasy Football. Go ahead and subscribe. Click the notification so you know exactly when we update these posts. And also, we have some very big news. We will be hosting our very first live stream this Sunday at 11:45 a.m. as we go over the Week 14 ins and outs and review our playoff statuses and see who has a good chance to make the playoffs this week. And don't forget to leave any comments on our YouTube channel and or Wingman Entertainment pages to get your questions or concerns placed into our mailbag, and we will address those in the next mailbag segment. Thank you all very much for understanding that I'm getting these out a little bit later, but we are almost all caught up, as at least we are done. We got these 2 episodes out by Friday. With that being said, guys, until we meet again, may your glasses be full and your mugs stay frosty, and we will see you next time.